David adjusted his navy blue tie one more time as he stepped out of his car. The parking lot of Antonio's Fine Dining was nearly empty, which seemed odd for a Saturday evening. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door for his wife, Lisa, who stepped out gracefully in her black evening dress. "You look beautiful," David said, offering his arm to his wife of 10 years. Tonight was special. It was their wedding anniversary, and they had decided to try this upscale Italian restaurant that his colleague had recommended. The place had excellent reviews online, and David had made sure to book a table weeks in advance. Lisa smiled and smoothed down her dress. She had spent extra time getting ready tonight, wanting everything to be perfect. "Are you sure this place is as good as everyone says?" she asked, looking at the elegant exterior of the restaurant with its warm lighting and expensive-looking decorations. "Trust me," David replied, squeezing her hand gently. "Dr. Peterson said this place serves the best Italian food in the city. Plus, look at this place. It's got to be good." They walked through the heavy glass doors into the restaurant's lobby. The interior was impressive with dim lighting, polished marble floors, and classical music playing softly in the background. Fresh flowers adorned every table and the smell of garlic and herbs filled the air. This was exactly the kind of place David had hoped for their special night. Behind the host station stood a man in his 50s with slicked-back gray hair and a perfectly pressed black suit. His name tag read, Vincent Romano, Manager. He was busy writing in a large reservation book, but David noticed his pen stop moving the moment they walked in. Vincent looked up slowly, his eyes scanning David and Lisa from head to toe. His welcoming smile, which had been automatic just seconds before, faded noticeably. The change in his expression was subtle but unmistakable. David felt a familiar, uncomfortable feeling in his stomach, but he pushed it aside. Maybe the man was just having a bad day. "Good evening," David said politely, stepping forward with Lisa beside him. "We have a reservation for 7:30. The name is Thompson." Vincent's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked down at his reservation book. He flipped through several pages, taking much longer than necessary. The restaurant wasn't busy. David could see only a few tables occupied in the dining room beyond the lobby. Finding their reservation should have taken seconds. "Thompson," Vincent repeated, his tone already skeptical. "Are you sure you called the right restaurant?" Lisa stepped forward, maintaining her calm composure despite the man's obvious attitude. "Yes, I'm certain. I called 3 weeks ago and confirmed the reservation yesterday afternoon. I spoke with someone named Maria." Vincent continued flipping through his book, making exaggerated motions of searching. I don't see anything here. What time did you say?" 7:30, David replied, checking his watch. It was exactly 7:30 now. "Look, if there's some confusion, I can show you the confirmation email on my phone." But Vincent wasn't looking at David anymore. He was staring past them at the nearly empty dining room as if he was calculating something. When he looked back at the couple, his expression had hardened even more. "You know," Vincent said, his voice taking on a condescending tone, "this is a very upscale establishment. We cater to a particular type of clientele. I'm not sure this is the right fit for you." The words hit David like a physical blow. He had heard variations of this speech before, but never so directly. Lisa's hand tightened on his arm, and he could feel her anger even though her face remained perfectly composed. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Lisa asked, her voice steady but with an edge that David recognized. She was a professional who dealt with difficult people every day, and she wasn't going to be intimidated. Vincent shrugged, not even trying to hide his prejudice now. "Look, I'm just being honest here. This restaurant has a certain atmosphere, a certain expectation of its guests. Maybe you'd be more comfortable at that chain restaurant down the street. They're more accommodating to all types of people." David felt his face grow hot with anger, but years of experience had taught him to stay calm in situations like this. He had worked too hard and come too far to let someone like this ruin his evening or provoke him into doing something he'd regret. "Sir," David said, his voice carefully controlled, "we made a reservation. We're dressed appropriately, and we're here to enjoy a quiet dinner for our anniversary. I don't understand what the problem is." Vincent's laugh was cold and humorless. "The problem? The problem is that I run a respectable business here. My regular customers expect a certain environment when they come to dine. They don't want to be made uncomfortable." Lisa looked around the nearly empty restaurant. "Uncomfortable by what exactly?" "We're two people trying to have dinner." "Listen," Vincent said, stepping closer and lowering his voice. I've been in this business for over 20 years. I know what works and what doesn't. This isn't personal, it's just business. There are plenty of other places in town that would be happy to serve you. The conversation had attracted the attention of the few diners in the restaurant. David could see people at 3 tables turning to watch the scene unfold. Some were reaching for their phones, and he realized this humiliating moment might soon be recorded and shared online. A young waitress appeared from the kitchen carrying a tray of bread. When she saw what was happening at the host station, she stopped and stared. Her face showed a mixture of confusion and embarrassment, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was witnessing. "Mr. Romano," she said quietly. "Is everything all right here?" Vincent turned toward her sharply. "Everything's fine, Maria. These people were just leaving." Maria looked at David and Lisa, then back at her boss. David could see the conflict in her eyes. She knew this was wrong, but she also knew she needed her job. "But sir," Maria said hesitantly, "I remember taking their reservation. Mrs. Thompson called and confirmed yesterday." Vincent's face flushed red with anger. "Maria, go back to the kitchen now." The young woman retreated quickly, but not before giving David and Lisa an apologetic look that said more than words ever could. David took a deep breath, trying to decide how to handle this situation. He could make a scene, demand to speak to the owner, or call the police. But he also knew that none of those options would give him and Lisa the peaceful anniversary dinner they had planned. Sometimes, he had learned, the best response to hatred was simply to maintain your dignity and walk away. "Come on, honey," he said to Lisa, placing his hand gently on her back. "Let's go somewhere that actually wants our business." But Lisa wasn't ready to give up so easily. This was their anniversary, and she had been looking forward to this dinner for weeks. More importantly, she knew that walking away without saying anything would just encourage Vincent to treat the next couple the same way. "This is discrimination," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the lobby. "And everyone here knows it." Vincent's face grew even redder. "You can call it whatever you want, lady. This is my restaurant, and I decide who gets served here. Now you need to leave before I call security." As if on cue, a large man in a dark suit appeared from a side door. He was clearly the restaurant's security guard, and he was moving slowly toward the host station with his hand resting on his radio. David realized the situation was escalating beyond what he was comfortable with. The last thing he wanted was for this to become a physical confrontation, especially with Lisa there. He had too much to lose and too much responsibility to let his anger get the better of him. "We're leaving," David said firmly, taking Lisa's hand. "But this isn't over." Vincent smiled triumphantly. "Have a good evening," he said with mock politeness. "And maybe next time you'll call ahead to make sure a restaurant is the right fit before you waste everyone's time." As David and Lisa walked toward the exit, they could feel the eyes of every person in the restaurant following them. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft classical music that continued playing as if nothing had happened. Behind them, they heard Vincent talking loudly to the security guard about keeping the riffraff out. Just before they reached the door, David turned back one more time. Vincent was watching them leave with a satisfied expression, clearly pleased with himself for what he considered a job well done. The manager had no idea who he had just thrown out of his restaurant, or what the consequences of his actions would be. Outside in the parking lot, David and Lisa stood beside their car in the warm evening air. The humiliation stung, but they both knew they had handled themselves with dignity. They had encountered prejudice before, but rarely so blatantly or publicly. "I'm sorry, honey," David said, pulling Lisa close. "This isn't how I wanted to spend our anniversary." Lisa looked back at the restaurant, where Vincent was now talking animatedly with his staff, probably telling them how he had handled the situation. She smiled grimly, knowing that Vincent Romano had just made the biggest mistake of his career. "Don't worry," she said, squeezing David's hand. "Something tells me this story isn't over yet." Vincent Romano watched through the restaurant's large windows as the couple stood in the parking lot beside their expensive sedan. He felt a surge of satisfaction wash over him. Another problem handled efficiently, just like his father had taught him when he first started working at the restaurant 25 years ago. "Some people just don't know their place," he muttered to himself, straightening his tie and smoothing back his gray hair. He turned back toward the dining room, where the few remaining customers were still whispering among themselves about what they had just witnessed. Maria, the young waitress, approached him cautiously. She had been working at Antonio's for 2 years and had never seen anything quite like this before. Her hands were shaking slightly as she clutched her order pad. "Mr. Romano," she said quietly. "I don't understand what just happened. Those people seemed very nice and they did have a reservation. I remember taking it myself." Vincent's face darkened. "Maria, you've got a lot to learn about running a business like this. We've built our reputation over decades by maintaining certain standards. Our regular customers come here because they know what kind of atmosphere to expect." "But sir," Maria pressed, "they were dressed nicely, they were polite, and they had a confirmed reservation. I don't see what the problem was." Vincent stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "The problem, Maria, is that you're questioning my judgment. If you don't like how I run this restaurant, there are plenty of other places in town looking for waitresses. Is that what you want?" Maria's face went pale. She had 2 kids at home and couldn't afford to lose this job, no matter how uncomfortable it made her feel. "No, sir. I'm sorry for questioning you." "Good," Vincent replied, his voice returning to normal volume. "Now get back to work. We still have customers to serve." As Maria retreated toward the kitchen, Vincent noticed that several diners were filming with their phones. The realization made him uncomfortable for a moment, but he quickly pushed the feeling aside. What did he care if a few people posted videos online? His restaurant had been successful for decades without needing the approval of strangers on the internet. Meanwhile, outside in the parking lot, David was helping Lisa into the passenger seat of their car. The evening air felt heavy and oppressive, matching their mood perfectly. This was supposed to be their special night, a celebration of 10 years of marriage, and instead they were sitting in a parking lot after being humiliated in public. "I can't believe that just happened," Lisa said, shaking her head in disbelief. "In this day and age, I thought we were past this kind of blatant discrimination." David started the engine but didn't immediately pull out of the parking space. He was still processing what had occurred inside the restaurant. "You know what bothers me most?" he said. "It wasn't just the manager. Did you see how everyone else just sat there and watched? Nobody said anything. Nobody stood up." Lisa nodded grimly. "Except for that young waitress. Did you see her face? She knew what was happening was wrong, but she was too scared to do anything about it." They sat in silence for a moment, both lost in their own thoughts. David had worked his entire adult life to get to where he was today. He had studied for years, worked countless hours, and dedicated himself to helping others. Yet none of that mattered to the man inside that restaurant. All Vincent Romano saw was the color of their skin. "Should we call someone?" Lisa asked. "File a complaint with the city or the Better Business Bureau?" David considered this for a moment. "We could, but you know how these things usually go. He'll deny everything, claim it was a misunderstanding, and nothing will change." As they talked, neither David nor Lisa noticed the figure approaching their car from across the parking lot. It was Maria, the young waitress who had slipped out the restaurant's back door during her break. She looked nervous as she walked toward them, glancing back at the restaurant to make sure Vincent wasn't watching. She tapped gently on Lisa's window. When Lisa rolled it down, Maria leaned closer, speaking in a rush of words. "I'm so sorry about what happened in there," she said breathlessly. "Mr. Romano was completely wrong, and I want you to know that not all of us feel that way. I took your reservation myself, and you were nothing but polite and respectful." Lisa smiled at the young woman. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know." "There's something else," Maria continued, looking around nervously. "This isn't the first time something like this has happened. Mr. Romano has done this before with other customers, and he always gets away with it because people are too embarrassed or too tired to fight back." David leaned across to speak to Maria through the window. "Are you saying this is a pattern?" "Yes," Maria replied firmly, "and someone needs to stop him. I can't do anything because I need this job, but maybe you can." She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. "Here's my number. If you decide to do something about this, I'll tell people what I saw. It's not right, and I'm tired of being quiet about it." Before David or Lisa could respond, Maria hurried back toward the restaurant, disappearing through the same back door she had used to come outside. David and Lisa looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. This wasn't just about their ruined anniversary dinner anymore. If Vincent Romano was making a habit of discriminating against customers, then someone needed to hold him accountable. "What do you think?" David asked his wife. "Are we ready for this fight?" Lisa's jaw was set with determination. He picked the wrong couple to mess with tonight. Back inside the restaurant, Vincent was growing increasingly irritated by the continued attention from his remaining diners. 3 tables of customers were still whispering and pointing, and one elderly woman had been on her phone for the past 10 minutes, speaking in hushed but animated tones. He decided to address the situation head-on. Walking over to the table where the elderly woman was sitting with her husband, Vincent put on his most professional smile. "Is everything all right with your meal this evening?" he asked, though his tone suggested he wasn't really interested in their answer. The woman, who appeared to be in her 70s, looked up at him with clear disgust in her eyes. "Actually, no. Everything is not all right. What we just witnessed was absolutely shameful." Vincent's smile faltered. "I'm not sure what you mean, ma'am." "Don't play dumb with me, young man," the woman replied sharply. "I've been alive for 7 decades, and I know discrimination when I see it. Those people did nothing wrong, and you treated them terribly." Her husband nodded in agreement. "We've been coming to this restaurant for 5 years, Vincent. We've recommended it to friends and family. But after tonight, we won't be back." Vincent felt his composure slipping. "Now hold on a minute, you don't understand the situation. This is a business, and I have to make decisions that are best for all of my customers." "What's best for your customers," the woman said, standing up from her chair, "is to treat all people with basic human dignity and respect, something you clearly failed to do tonight." She threw her napkin down on the table and picked up her purse. "Come on, Harold. Let's go somewhere that serves decent food with a side of common decency." As the elderly couple prepared to leave, Vincent realized that other diners were watching the second confrontation with even more interest than the first. He could see dollar signs walking out the door, and panic began to set in. "Please," he said, following the couple toward the exit. "There's been a misunderstanding. Let me comp your meal, and we can forget this whole thing happened." But the woman was having none of it. "The only misunderstanding here is yours. If you think decent people want to eat in a restaurant run by a bigot." As she pushed open the door to leave, she turned back one more time. "And just so you know, I've already called 3 of my friends to tell them what kind of person you really are. Word spreads fast in this town, especially when it's about something this disgusting." The door swung shut behind them, leaving Vincent standing in his lobby feeling like his world was starting to crumble around him. He looked back at his remaining customers, most of whom were avoiding eye contact now. The cheerful atmosphere that had filled the restaurant an hour ago had been replaced by an uncomfortable tension that seemed to seep into every corner of the dining room. Maria appeared at his elbow, having returned from her break. "Mr. Romano, Table 6 is asking for their check. They said they want to leave early tonight." Vincent nodded absently, his mind racing as he tried to figure out how to salvage the situation. But deep down, he had a sinking feeling that the damage was already done. He had been so focused on keeping what he saw as undesirable customers out of his restaurant that he hadn't stopped to consider what would happen if his actions were recorded and shared with the world. As he watched another table signal for their check, Vincent Romano had no idea that his life was about to change in ways he never could have imagined. The couple he had thrown out weren't just random customers looking for a nice dinner. They were people with the power to make him pay dearly for his prejudice and hatred. Outside in the parking lot, David was already on his phone, making calls that would set in motion a chain of events that would rock Vincent's world to its very foundation. The restaurant owner thought he had won tonight, but he was about to learn that some battles have consequences far beyond what anyone could have predicted. The evening that had started with such promise for David and Lisa had turned into something entirely different. But as they drove away from Antonio's fine dining, both of them knew that this story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Rebecca Martinez arrived at Channel 7 News early Monday morning with her usual coffee and stack of weekend assignment reports. As the station's lead investigative reporter, she was used to sifting through dozens of viewer tips and social media submissions each week. Most of them led nowhere, but occasionally she would find a story that demanded attention. Today was one of those days. Her assistant, Tom, had left a note on her desk about a video that had been submitted over the weekend. "You need to see this," he had written in his messy handwriting. "Already has 50,000 views and climbing fast." Rebecca opened her laptop and clicked on the link Tom had provided. The video was shaky, clearly filmed on someone's phone, but the audio was crystal clear. She watched as a well-dressed black couple tried to get a table at what appeared to be an upscale restaurant, only to be turned away by a hostile manager who made no effort to hide his discriminatory behavior. The video had been posted to multiple social media platforms by someone calling themselves Witness to Truth 37. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times, with comments ranging from outrage to disbelief that something like this could still happen in their city. Rebecca replayed the video several times, taking notes on what she observed. The couple had remained calm and dignified throughout the entire encounter, even as the restaurant manager became increasingly hostile. Their composure under such humiliating circumstances impressed her, but it also made her angry. No one should have to maintain that level of self-control when faced with such blatant prejudice. What really caught her attention, though, was something the manager had said near the end of the video. He had mentioned that he had been in this business for over 20 years and knew what worked and what didn't. That suggested this wasn't a one-time incident, but rather part of a pattern of discriminatory behavior. Rebecca picked up her phone and called the restaurant. When someone answered, she could hear the stress in their voice immediately. "Antonio's Fine Dining, this is Maria speaking. How can I help you?" "Hi, I'm Rebecca Martinez from Channel 7 News. I'd like to speak with Vincent Romano about an incident that occurred at your restaurant over the weekend." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Mr. Romano isn't available right now. Can I take a message?" Rebecca could tell the young woman was nervous. "Actually, I'd like to speak with you too, if you have a moment. Were you working Saturday night when a black couple was turned away from the restaurant?" Another pause, even longer this time. I can't really talk about that. I'm sorry." The line went dead. Rebecca stared at her phone, more convinced than ever that there was a real story here. She spent the next hour researching Antonio's Fine Dining, looking up business records, health department reports, and any other public information she could find. What she discovered was interesting. The restaurant had been owned by the Romano family for over 30 years. Vincent had taken over from his father about 10 years ago, and since then there had been several complaints filed with the city's Human Rights Commission. None had resulted in any formal action, but the pattern was clear. Rebecca also found something else that made her pause. In the restaurant's online reviews, there were several comments from people describing experiences similar to what she had seen in the video. Most were vague, probably because people were afraid of legal retaliation. But the message was consistent. Certain customers were not welcome at Antonio's. Deciding she needed more information, Rebecca drove to the restaurant's location. It was in an upscale part of town, surrounded by expensive shops and professional offices. The kind of neighborhood where discrimination would be particularly shocking to most people. She parked across the street and observed the restaurant for about an hour. During that time, she saw only white customers going in and out. That could have been a coincidence, but combined with everything else she had learned, it seemed unlikely. Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "I saw your story request about Antonio's restaurant. I have information you need to know. Can we meet?" She quickly typed back, "Who is this?" "I work there. Can't talk on phone. Meet me at City Park, main entrance, 6 p.m. tonight." Rebecca hesitated for a moment. Meeting unknown sources could be risky, but her instincts told her this was important. She agreed to the meeting. That evening, Rebecca arrived at City Park early and waited near the main entrance. At exactly 6 o'clock, she saw a young Hispanic woman approaching nervously. She recognized her immediately as the voice from the phone call that morning. "Are you the reporter?" the woman asked quietly. "Yes, I'm Rebecca Martinez. You're Maria from the restaurant?" Maria nodded, looking around to make sure they weren't being watched. "I can't be seen talking to you. If Mr. Romano finds out, I'll lose my job, I understand. What can you tell me about what happened Saturday night?" Maria took a deep breath before speaking. That couple did nothing wrong. They had a reservation, they were dressed nicely, they were polite, but Mr. Romano took one look at them and decided he didn't want them in his restaurant. "Has this happened before?" "Yes," Maria replied without hesitation. Not often, maybe 3 or 4 times since I've been working there, but always the same. He finds excuses to turn away black customers or sometimes Hispanic families. He's very careful about how he does it. Usually claims there's no reservation or that they're not dressed appropriately. Rebecca took notes as Maria talked. Are you willing to go on the record about this? Maria's face went pale. I don't know. I have 2 kids and I need this job. But I also can't keep watching this happen and staying quiet. What if I could guarantee your anonymity? I could blur your face and disguise your voice. Maria thought about this for a moment. There's something else you should know. The couple from Saturday night? I think they might be important people. After they left, I heard Mr. Romano on the phone with someone and he sounded worried. Really worried. This got Rebecca's full attention. What did you hear? He was talking to his lawyer, I think. Something about damage control and how he hoped this wouldn't get out. But it was too late because people had already posted videos online. Rebecca thanked Maria for the information and promised to protect her identity if she decided to participate in the story. As she drove home that night, her mind was racing with possibilities. If the couple in the video were prominent members of the community, that would make the story even more significant. The next morning, Rebecca arrived at work with a new sense of purpose. She spent hours going through the video frame by frame, trying to get a better look at the couple who had been discriminated against. The man appeared to be in his 40s, well-dressed and professional-looking. The woman was elegant and composed, clearly someone used to handling difficult situations. Rebecca decided to try a different approach. She called several upscale restaurants in the area, asking if they had seen an increase in reservations from people mentioning Antonio's. The third restaurant she called gave her exactly what she was looking for. Oh yes, the hostess said. We've had several people mention that they were looking for somewhere else to eat because of some incident at Antonio's. One couple even said they were celebrating their anniversary and needed a last-minute reservation because their original plans fell through. Can you describe the couple? Rebecca asked. Well-dressed, very polite, African-American couple, probably in their 40s. The gentleman seemed like a professional, maybe a doctor or lawyer. The woman was stunning, very dignified. They ended up having a lovely evening here. Rebecca's heart raced. She was getting closer to identifying the victims of Vincent Romano's discrimination. She spent the rest of the day making phone calls to professional organizations, medical societies, and legal associations, trying to find someone who might recognize the couple from the video. Finally, late in the afternoon, she got the break she had been looking for. A receptionist at the Metropolitan Medical Center recognized the man in the video immediately. That's Dr. David Thompson, she said without hesitation. He's our chief of cardiology, one of the most respected doctors in the city. Are you doing a story about him? Rebecca felt like she had been struck by lightning. Dr. David Thompson wasn't just any doctor. He was a renowned heart surgeon who had saved countless lives over his career. She had heard his name mentioned in several medical breakthrough stories over the years. What about his wife? Rebecca asked. Do you know anything about her? Oh, Judge Lisa Thompson? She's amazing too. She sits on the federal court downtown. Really brilliant woman, known for being tough but fair. Rebecca thanked the receptionist and hung up, her mind reeling. Vincent Romano hadn't just discriminated against any random couple. He had thrown out one of the city's most respected doctors and a federal judge. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. She spent the next several hours researching both Dr. and Judge Thompson. What she found was extraordinary. Dr. Thompson had pioneered several life-saving heart procedures and regularly volunteered his time at free clinics. Judge Thompson had a reputation for fairness and integrity that was legendary in legal circles. But there was more. As Rebecca dug deeper into Dr. Thompson's background, she discovered something that made this story even more incredible. 5 years ago, Sarah. Dr. Thompson had performed emergency surgery on an elderly man who had suffered a massive heart attack. The man's life had been saved by Dr. Thompson's quick thinking and surgical skill. The man's name was Anthony Romano, Vincent Romano's father. Rebecca sat back in her chair, stunned by what she had uncovered. Vincent Romano had discriminated against the very doctor who had saved his father's life. The man he had treated with such contempt and disrespect was the same person who had worked through the night to repair his father's damaged heart. She immediately began making phone calls to verify this information. Hospital records were confidential, but she was able to confirm through other sources that Dr. Thompson had indeed been the surgeon who had saved Anthony Romano's life. As Rebecca prepared to write her story, she realized she had uncovered something much bigger than a simple case of restaurant discrimination. This was a story about karma, about consequences, and about how hatred and prejudice can blind people to the humanity of others. Vincent Romano thought he had gotten away with his discriminatory behavior, but he was about to learn that actions have consequences. The couple he had humiliated weren't just random customers. They were pillars of the community, and one of them had literally saved his father's life. Rebecca knew that when this story broke, it would change Vincent Romano's life forever. The question was whether he would learn from his mistakes or continue to be the same bigoted person he had always been. Either way, his actions on Saturday night were about to catch up with him in a way he never could have imagined. Vincent Romano woke up Tuesday morning feeling confident about how he had handled the situation at his restaurant. He had dealt with similar incidents before, and they always blew over within a few days. People would post angry comments online for a while, but eventually they would move on to something else, and business would return to normal. He was sipping his morning espresso and reading the newspaper when his phone started buzzing. At first, it was just a few text messages from friends asking if he had seen something online about his restaurant. Vincent ignored them, assuming it was just the usual social media drama that would fade away soon enough. But the messages kept coming. His phone rang constantly throughout the morning, with calls from family members, business associates, and even some of his regular customers. Each conversation was more uncomfortable than the last, with people asking him to explain what they had seen in a video that was going viral. By noon, Vincent realized he could no longer avoid looking at what people were talking about. He reluctantly opened his laptop and searched for his restaurant's name online. What he found made his stomach drop to the floor. The video from Saturday night was everywhere. It had been shared thousands of times across multiple platforms, and the comments were overwhelmingly negative. People were calling for boycotts of his restaurant, and several local news stations had picked up the story. But it was the article on Channel 7's website that made Vincent's world collapse entirely. The headline read, "Restaurant owner ejects renowned heart surgeon and federal judge." Below it was a professional photo of the couple he had thrown out of his restaurant Saturday night, identified as Dr. David Thompson and Judge Lisa Thompson. Vincent's hands shook as he read the article. Dr. Thompson wasn't just any doctor. He was the chief of cardiology at Metropolitan Medical Center, known throughout the city for his life-saving work. Judge Thompson sat on the federal court and was widely respected for her fairness and integrity. The article detailed their impressive accomplishments and contributions to the community. Dr. Thompson had pioneered several innovative heart procedures and regularly donated his time to free clinics in low-income neighborhoods. Judge Thompson had a reputation for treating everyone in her courtroom with equal dignity and respect, regardless of their background or circumstances. As Vincent continued reading, he felt a growing sense of dread. The reporter had done her homework, interviewing people who knew the Thompsons and painting a picture of two individuals who had dedicated their lives to serving others. The contrast with his own behavior on Saturday night was stark and humiliating, but then Vincent saw something that made him feel physically sick. Buried in the middle of the article was a paragraph that changed everything. Dr. Thompson is perhaps best known in the Romano family for a different reason. 5 years ago, he performed life-saving emergency surgery on Anthony Romano, the 78-year-old father of restaurant owner Vincent Romano. The elder Romano had suffered a massive heart attack at his son's restaurant and was rushed to Metropolitan Medical Center, where Dr. Thompson worked through the night to repair his damaged heart. Vincent stared at the screen in disbelief. The man he had humiliated and thrown out of his restaurant was the same doctor who had saved his father's life. The memory came rushing back to him with crystal clarity. It had been a busy Saturday night, much like this past weekend. His father, who still helped out at the restaurant occasionally despite his age, had suddenly clutched his chest and collapsed near the kitchen. Vincent had called 911 immediately, and paramedics had rushed his father to the nearest hospital. Vincent had spent the entire night in the hospital waiting room, praying for his father's survival. The surgeon who had operated on his father had been a tall professional black man who had spoken with confidence and compassion about the procedure. Vincent remembered being so focused on his father's survival that he had barely paid attention to the doctor's name. But now, looking at Dr. Thompson's photo on the news website, Vincent realized with horror that this was the same man who had saved his father's life. The same hands that had performed delicate heart surgery to keep his father alive were the hands Vincent had dismissed and disrespected just 3 days ago. Vincent's phone rang, interrupting his shocked silence. It was his lawyer, Michael Stevens, calling with urgent news. "Vincent, please tell me you haven't seen the news yet," Michael said without preamble. "I just read it," Vincent replied weakly. "Michael, what am I going to do?" "This is a disaster." "That's an understatement," Michael replied grimly. "My phone has been ringing all morning with calls from reporters wanting comments. The story is everywhere. Local news, social media, even some national outlets are picking it up." Vincent felt his world spinning out of control. "What kind of legal trouble am I in?" "Potentially serious trouble," Michael said. "Discrimination lawsuits are expensive and time-consuming, and based on what I've seen in that video, you don't have much of a defense." "But that's not even the worst part." "What do you mean?" Vincent asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "Vincent, do you realize who these people are? Dr. Thompson isn't just any doctor. He's connected to some of the most powerful people in this city. Judge Thompson sits on the federal court. They have friends in politics, law enforcement, the medical community, and the business world. This story isn't going away, and neither are the consequences." As if to prove Michael's point, Vincent's other phone line began ringing immediately. When he answered, it was the president of the local restaurant association. "Vincent, what the hell were you thinking?" the man demanded without introduction. "Do you have any idea what kind of damage this does to all of us? We're calling an emergency meeting for tonight to discuss your membership status." Before Vincent could respond, the man hung up. Within minutes, Vincent received similar calls from his food suppliers, his insurance company, and even his landlord. Everyone wanted to distance themselves from him as quickly as possible. By mid-afternoon, the situation had gotten even worse. Protesters had gathered outside Antonio's fine dining, carrying signs with messages like "No place for hate" and "Racism has no reservation here." Local news crews were filming the demonstrations, ensuring that Vincent's humiliation would be broadcast across the city. Vincent tried to call several of his regular customers to explain his side of the story, but most wouldn't take his calls. The few who did speak with him were cold and distant, making it clear that they would not be returning to his restaurant anytime soon. As evening approached, Vincent realized that his staff was abandoning him too. Maria had called in sick, and 2 other waitresses had quit over the phone. His head chef, Carlos, who had worked at the restaurant for 8 years, came to Vincent's office to announce his resignation. "I can't be associated with this anymore, Mr. Romano," Carlos said sadly. "My family came to this country looking for opportunities and respect. I can't work for someone who treats people the way you treated that couple." Vincent tried to convince Carlos to stay, offering him a raise and promising that things would return to normal soon. But Carlos just shook his head and walked away, leaving Vincent alone in his empty restaurant. That night, Vincent sat in his office surrounded by stacks of cancellation notices and resignation letters. The phone had finally stopped ringing, but only because he had stopped answering it. Outside, he could still hear the protesters chanting and the sounds of news crews setting up for their evening broadcasts. Vincent thought about his father, who was now 83 years old and living in a nursing home. Anthony Romano had built this restaurant from nothing, working 16-hour days to create something he could pass down to his son. Now Vincent was watching it all crumble because of his own prejudice and stupidity. The cruel irony wasn't lost on him. His father was alive today because of Dr. David Thompson's skill and dedication. The man Vincent had treated with such contempt had literally saved his family. And instead of being grateful, Vincent had repaid that kindness with hatred and discrimination. Vincent pulled out his phone and scrolled through the hundreds of angry comments and messages he had received throughout the day. People from all over the country were expressing their outrage and disappointment. Some of the messages were threatening, while others were simply heartbroken that this kind of behavior still existed. One message in particular caught his attention. It was from someone claiming to be a former customer who had eaten at Antonio's regularly for years. I brought my family to your restaurant every month for special occasions, the message read. My children loved the atmosphere and we always felt welcome there. But after seeing how you treated Dr. and Judge Thompson, I realized that our welcome was only because we looked like you. That breaks my heart, and it should break yours too. As Vincent read message after message, he began to understand the full scope of what he had done. This wasn't just about one incident on one night. This was about a lifetime of prejudice and hatred that had finally been exposed for the world to see. He thought about Dr. Thompson working through the night to save his father's life, never knowing that he was helping the family of someone who would later treat him with such disrespect. He thought about Judge Thompson, who had dedicated her career to ensuring that all people were treated fairly under the law, being denied even the basic courtesy of a restaurant table. Vincent realized that he had become everything he claimed to stand against. He had always told himself that he was protecting his business and his customers, but the truth was much simpler and more shameful. He was a bigot who had used his position of power to hurt innocent people. As the night wore on and the protesters finally went home, Vincent Romano sat alone in his ruined restaurant and contemplated the wreckage of his life. He had lost his business, his reputation, and the respect of his community. But more than that, he had lost something fundamental about himself, the ability to look in the mirror and feel proud of who he was. The couple he had thrown out weren't just random customers. They were two of the most admirable people in the city, individuals who had spent their lives helping others and making their community better. And he had treated them like they were beneath him, simply because of the color of their skin. Vincent knew that tomorrow would bring even more consequences. More news stories, more canceled reservations, more staff resignations. His 30-year-old family business was probably finished and his reputation would never recover. But as he sat there in the darkness, Vincent began to realize that perhaps this was exactly what he deserved. He had spent years treating people badly and getting away with it. Now finally, he was facing the consequences of his actions. The question was whether he would learn from this experience or continue to blame others for his own mistakes. That choice, Vincent realized, would determine not just the fate of his business, but the fate of his soul. 3 weeks after the incident, Vincent Romano stood outside Metropolitan Medical Center with trembling hands. The past month had been the worst of his life. His restaurant was closed indefinitely, his staff had all quit, and his reputation was destroyed. But none of that mattered as much as what he had come here to do today. The security guard at the hospital's main entrance recognized him immediately from all the news coverage. "Can I help you, sir?" the guard asked, his tone professional but cool. "I need to speak with Dr. David Thompson," Vincent said quietly. "I know he probably doesn't want to see me, but I have something important to tell him." The guard studied Vincent for a long moment, taking in his tired appearance and genuine distress. After the story had broken, the hospital had received hundreds of supportive messages for Dr. Thompson, so everyone knew what had happened. "Wait here," the guard said, picking up his phone. After a brief conversation, he hung up and looked back at Vincent. "Dr. Thompson is in surgery right now, but he said he'll see you in his office at 4 o'clock. That's in 2 hours." Vincent nodded gratefully and found a seat in the hospital lobby. As he waited, he watched the steady stream of patients, families, and medical staff moving through the halls. This was Dr. Thompson's world, a place dedicated to healing and helping people, regardless of who they were or what they looked like. Vincent thought about the past 3 weeks and how much his life had changed. The protests outside his restaurant had continued for days, with people from all over the city coming to express their outrage. Local businesses had stopped working with him, his suppliers had canceled their contracts, and his insurance company had dropped his coverage. But the hardest part had been the conversations with his own family. His elderly father had been devastated when he learned what had happened. Anthony Romano had spent his final years proudly telling anyone who would listen about the brilliant surgeon who had saved his life. Now he had to live with the knowledge that his son had treated that same doctor with cruelty and disrespect. Vincent's sister had stopped speaking to him entirely. His nephew, who had always looked up to him, wouldn't return his phone calls. Even his ex-wife, who had divorced him years ago because of his attitude toward people who were different from him, had called to tell him how disappointed she was. At exactly 4 o'clock, Vincent was escorted to Dr. Thompson's office. The room was filled with medical texts, certificates and thank you letters from grateful patients and their families. Behind the desk sat the man Vincent had humiliated just weeks earlier. Dr. Thompson looked up as Vincent entered. He appeared tired. Vincent later learned he had just finished a 12-hour surgery, but his expression was calm and professional. "Mr. Romano," Dr. Thompson said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "Please sit down." Vincent sat down nervously, unsure how to begin. "Dr. Thompson, I don't even know where to start. What I did to you and your wife was inexcusable." Dr. Thompson nodded slowly. "It was difficult," he admitted. "Not just because of how we were treated, but because it happened on our anniversary. We had planned that evening for weeks." "I'm so sorry," Vincent said, his voice breaking with emotion. "I came here because I found out something that makes what I did even worse, if that's possible." Dr. Thompson raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Vincent took a deep breath. 5 years ago, my father collapsed at the restaurant from a heart attack. The surgeon who saved his life was you. You worked all night to repair his heart. And because of your skill and dedication, my father lived for 5 more years. Dr. Thompson was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "I remember that case," he said slowly. "Elderly gentleman, severe blockage in multiple arteries. It was touch and go for a while." "That was my father," Vincent confirmed. "And instead of being grateful to you for saving his life, I treated you like you were beneath me. I threw you out of my restaurant simply because of the color of your skin." Vincent began to cry, something he hadn't done since he was a child. "Dr. Thompson, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. But I needed you to know that I understand now how wrong I was. Not just about that night, but about everything. My whole life, I've been filled with prejudice and hatred, and it took losing everything to make me see what kind of person I had become." Dr. Thompson studied Vincent carefully. As a doctor, he had seen people at their worst moments and had learned to recognize genuine remorse. What he saw in Vincent wasn't someone trying to manipulate his way out of consequences, but rather a man who had been genuinely transformed by the weight of his actions. "Mr. Romano," Dr. Thompson said gently, "I appreciate you coming here. I know it couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," Vincent admitted, "but it was necessary. Dr. Thompson, I want to change. I know that sounds hollow coming from me, but I mean it. I've spent the past 3 weeks thinking about my life and realizing how much damage I've done to other people over the years." Dr. Thompson leaned back in his chair. "Change isn't easy, especially for someone our age. It requires genuine soul-searching and a commitment to doing better every single day. I'm willing to do whatever it takes," Vincent said earnestly. "I've already started seeing a counselor who specializes in helping people overcome prejudice and hatred. I've closed my restaurant not just because I had to, but because I want to take time to really understand how my actions have hurt people." "What about your staff?" Dr. Thompson asked. "I understand several people lost their jobs because of this." Vincent nodded sadly. "I've been trying to help them find new positions. My head chef, Carlos, was hired by that new restaurant downtown, and I wrote him a recommendation letter. I also gave severance pay to everyone, even though I didn't have to legally." Dr. Thompson was impressed by this gesture, though he didn't say so out loud. "And what about your future plans?" "I don't know yet," Vincent admitted. "I may never be able to reopen the restaurant. My reputation is destroyed, and honestly, that's probably for the best. Maybe I can find some other way to contribute to the community, some way to make up for the damage I've done." They sat in silence for a moment before Dr. Thompson spoke again. "Mr. Romano, I want you to understand something. What you did to my wife and me wasn't just about one evening. It was part of a pattern of behavior that has hurt many people over many years. The real question is whether you're truly committed to changing, or whether this is just temporary remorse that will fade when people stop paying attention." "I understand," Vincent said. "And I know that words aren't enough. I have to prove through my actions that I've changed." Dr. Thompson nodded. "There's something else you should know. Your actions didn't just hurt Lisa and me. They hurt everyone who witnessed them, everyone who heard about them, and everyone who has ever been treated the way you treated us. Discrimination doesn't just damage the immediate victims, it damages the whole community." Vincent felt the full weight of Dr. Thompson's words. He had never considered how his actions affected people beyond his direct victims. "How do I even begin to make up for that?" "By dedicating the rest of your life to treating all people with dignity and respect. Dr. Thompson replied. By using your experience to help other people understand the damage that prejudice causes. By becoming an example of how someone can change, even when change seems impossible. Over the next hour, Dr. Thompson and Vincent had the most honest conversation of Vincent's life. They talked about prejudice, about the systemic racism that still existed in their community, and about the responsibility that everyone had to create a more just and equitable society. Dr. Thompson also shared his own experiences with discrimination, helping Vincent understand that the incident at the restaurant was just one of many similar encounters he had faced throughout his career. Despite his accomplishments and reputation, he still had to deal with people who judged him based on the color of his skin rather than his character or abilities. As their conversation drew to a close, Dr. Thompson made Vincent an unexpected offer. Mr. Romano, there's a community health clinic in the downtown area that serves mainly low-income families. Many of the patients there have experienced discrimination in healthcare settings, and they're often hesitant to trust medical professionals. Vincent listened intently as Dr. Thompson continued. The clinic is looking for volunteers to help with non-medical tasks, filing paperwork, greeting patients, helping people navigate the system. It's not glamorous work and it doesn't pay anything, but it would give you a chance to serve the community you've hurt. You would recommend me for something like that? Vincent asked, surprised. I would give you a chance to prove that your change is real, Dr. Thompson corrected, but only if you're truly committed to doing the work, both the external work of serving others and the internal work of changing yourself. Vincent accepted the offer immediately. Over the following months, he spent 3 days a week at the clinic, doing whatever tasks were needed. He helped elderly patients fill out insurance forms, played with children in the waiting room, and gradually learned to see the humanity in people he had previously dismissed or ignored. The work was humbling and often difficult. Many of the patients were suspicious of him at first, especially after word spread about who he was and what he had done. But Vincent persisted, showing up every day and treating everyone with kindness and respect. Slowly, people began to see that his remorse was genuine. He used his own story as a cautionary tale, speaking at community events about the damage that prejudice causes and the importance of treating all people with dignity. Vincent also used his business experience to help other small business owners understand the importance of creating inclusive environments. He worked with the local Chamber of Commerce to develop anti-discrimination training programs and helped establish policies to ensure that all customers were treated fairly. The transformation wasn't easy or quick. Vincent struggled with deep-seated prejudices that had been ingrained in him since childhood. There were days when he slipped back into old patterns of thinking, and there were people who would never forgive him for his past actions. But Dr. Thompson's faith in his ability to change proved to be justified. Over time, Vincent became a genuine advocate for civil rights and social justice. He used his own experience as proof that even people with the most entrenched prejudices could learn to be better. 5 years after the incident at Antonio's fine dining, Vincent Romano stood before a packed auditorium at the university, delivering a speech about overcoming hatred and prejudice. In the audience sat Dr. and Judge Thompson, who had become unlikely allies in Vincent's journey toward redemption. Vincent's restaurant never reopened, but he had found something more valuable than financial success. He had found a way to contribute positively to his community and to make amends for the damage he had caused. The man who had once thrown out a respected doctor and judge because of their race had become someone who dedicated his life to ensuring that others would never experience the same kind of discrimination. It was proof that people could change, even when that change seemed impossible. As Vincent concluded his speech, he looked out at the diverse audience and realized that his journey was far from over. Changing deeply ingrained prejudices was a lifelong process, one that required constant vigilance and commitment. But for the first time in his life, Vincent Romano could look in the mirror and feel proud of the person he was becoming. He had learned that true success wasn't measured by the exclusion of others, but by the inclusion and service of all people, regardless of who they were or what they looked like.